Well, welcome to CV. Thank you for joining. I'm very, very
Thank
grateful.
you. It's my pleasure.
Can you tell me about your role in EveryWay and what drew you to work in assistive technology and inclusive education?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the International Education Manager at EveryWay. The company was formerly known as Texthelp. It was Texthelp for around 30 years and just rebranded at the beginning of this year to EveryWay following a merger. And as International Education Manager, I have the absolute pleasure of working with schools, colleges, and universities in quite a large part of the world. So I cover what we call rest of the world, so where we don't have an office region. So that is Europe, Middle East, Africa, Latin America, and South Asia. So working with lots of different schools and educators in all of those different regions. And so I've been with the company for about 8 years. And originally I was attracted to the company itself because I worked in a completely different industry before. So I was in business development for like a clinical diagnostics company.
Yeah.
But Texthelp, as it was known then, was a local company that had a fantastic reputation for being a really great place to work. And I knew a few people that had come to work here. And when a job came up, I applied for it, and thankfully I got the job, and I have not looked back. When I started sort of looking into what Texthelp actually does, I just completely fell in love with the mission. The simplicity of wanting to help everyone to understand and be understood, but when you actually see day to day what we do, what our tools do, and the impact that it has on learners and also on in the workplace, because we have an education and a workplace division. It's just an absolute delight, and it is a fantastic place to work as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. We all need a place like that. Maybe
Yeah,
a couple of companies
absolutely.
could take note of what goes on in there and follow suit.
Yeah, highly recommend. Actually, they're just the colleagues, everybody that I work with. Everybody has that shared vision and that shared passion, and knowing that you're coming to work every day and that you're doing good, that you're doing something good, that you're helping people is a really great feeling.
Yeah, I would imagine. And to have that tribe, as you said, and you all have the same vision for the end goal, um, must be so wonderful. Must be so, so wonderful to be part of. So, how would you say then, in practice, either or both in the workplace or education, that inclusive ed tech, what does it look like?
It's something that I think is still very much evolving. Some places do it great, and some places not so much. And there's still a long way to go. But for me, I think inclusive ed tech means like designing and using technology that doesn't just accommodate needs, but actively empowers learners or actively empowers employees, especially those who are neurodivergent or disabled, multilingual learners that might be, at a slight disadvantage in their workplace, to really engage fully, learn independently, and to feel included. I think, it's given people what they need to do their job.
Wow. And do you have any examples of either in school or in the workplace where you just really saw the benefits?
There are
Many.
so many examples. Over the last number of years that I've worked here, the amount of times that even being at events and conferences, when people come up to you that maybe used the tools when they were a student and said, like, your tools changed my life. Your tools allowed me to get through university. There are so many students that were at the point where they were really struggling. They were going to give up, and having assistive technology tools has really helped them to get through, to overcome the areas that they find challenging, and to really unlock their potential and unlock the strengths that they have. I think one that really stands out for me, and it's a young boy who features in one of our case study videos. I should share the link as well so you can hear it. It's a young boy called Freddie who was in primary school in the UK. Now Freddie is, I think, one of the most eloquent and articulate little boys that I've ever come across. But he has dyslexia and ADHD, and he was really struggling in school, and he was actually at the point where school refusal was a bit of an issue in the house. You know, he didn't want to go, he didn't enjoy it. Now, fortunately, he went to school that was very tech savvy, and that had great digital, policies and everything in place. So he got access to and all of the learners actually, not just Freddie or not just children with additional learning needs, but they all had access to technology. And then when they got access to our tools within the school, it just completely transformed Freddie. And he has a lovely little video where he talks about how it made such a difference, where he was able to come to school where previously he struggled, and now he had the tools to fully engage in the learning, to actually show what he knows. And it's something that I've even seen with my own son who has ADHD, and I introduced him to speech to text technology because my son is one of those kids who hates writing. He if he's doing a reading comprehension and he has to answer the questions, he does not want to. He wants to give you the 2-word answer. He doesn't want to write the sentence stem. But if you talk to him, he knows the answers. He's, again, very articulate, great vocabulary range, but that doesn't come across in his writing. So when I introduced him to speech to text and he was able to dictate and see the software writing on the screen what he was saying, his face was just a picture. He couldn't believe it. And he just looked at me completely, awestruck. I was like, this is great. Can I use this? With his school, though, they don't really use technology a lot. They're still very manual, sort of pen and paper, pencil and paper. But we agreed then with the school, after having a chat with them, that for homework, where they're not assessing his actual handwriting, then that he is able to use technology to produce the work. So there's so many different examples of little things like that. It might be the whole toolbar. Read and Write, our software has lots of different literacy support features and functions, but some learners might just need one or two to sort of really boost them and help with their output and their productivity.
And so that's incredible. I'm intrigued when it comes to examinations. Is that a device that can be used?
Yeah, so yeah, our software can be used in sort of those high stakes end of year assessments as well. So things like GCSEs, A levels, IB exams as well. So we are fully compliant with exam board regulations. And it's really helping to level the playing field for those learners that could be disadvantaged when it comes to exams. So if they are struggling to read the question papers, if they are struggling, with the output of their answers, that they get access to these tools. Some schools won't use technology. Some schools, will use like a human reader to sit beside the student and read for them, or a scribe to help them write their answers. But we found from talking to students that they much prefer they having that opportunity to use the technology, because it's making them a lot more independent as well. When they leave school and they go to university or when they go to work, they're not going to have an adult sitting beside them reading things for them all the time. So, and as a teenager as well, when you're doing these exams, and you're working hard and you want to do the best that you can do, sometimes having that adult sit beside you, it makes you feel even more different. It makes you feel uncomfortable. You've got that sort of stigma, I suppose, attached to it as well. So being able to use technology is a real game changer for some of those students, just giving them that independence and the knowledge that they can do it for themselves.
That's incredible. It's I guess it's making me reflect back to my own childhood, and the difference it would have made in my life would have been unbelievable. But when you're talking about that human there beside you, and I know we want that connectivity, but I even remember things like the oral exam. You have a person asking you the questions, and you're in a panic state, wanting to give them the right answer. Whereas I feel for me, when I did university, I was able to self-learn a lot. You know, I was able to watch tutorials online, attend and watch. And what that meant is I could learn at my own pace. I could pause. I could reflect. So if someone, you know, you might not want to ask them to repeat the question again, or, you know, so I think that technology there is incredible to use.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something as well, from speaking to a lot of students, that was an issue. You know, maybe somebody reads the question to you and you haven't quite grasped, well, what it's asking you to do. So you might ask them to repeat it. Maybe you'll ask them a third time, but there's going to come a point where you're too embarrassed to say, actually, I'm still not sure what you're asking me. Can you read that again? And I think having that ability just to, like you say, go at your own pace, listen to it, you know, with your headphones as many times as you need to until you can actually process what the question is asking of you.
And it brings to mind, you know, the likes of rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, in that, you know, you might perceive that the adult has a sigh or a stone look face, and you think, oh, I can't ask again. They're getting frustrated, or, you know, they're judging me, which again has its own list of issues that go along with not giving you the best opportunity to succeed within exams.
Yeah, so you don't know what narrative people have going on in their heads as well, especially with neurodivergence. That, you know, I've seen a lot of the time the impact that it can have on self-esteem and self-confidence, and that, you know, having that sort of negative internal narrative sometimes, and other people don't see that. That's kind of something that's going on internally for the person.
Whereas I guess the technology allows them to have them small wins over and over and over again at their own pace, which is amazing. I'm intrigued with the technology. Is it that, let's say, a parent or a child, or if it's within like a work organization, do you assess the individual and advise the technology that might benefit them, or do they research themselves and choose what they feel would be the right fit?
We don't, as a company, we don't assess anyone. What tends to happen is, again, our software is sold in a number of ways. So there are individual licenses. So yes, like a parent may have had, or anyone, I guess, could have a diagnosis and you know, discover that they could benefit from software, and they can purchase that for themselves. With schools, it tends to be, you know, that there are a number of learners within the school that have identified needs, and schools then are looking for software to support those learners. And the same in the workplace as well, that there are a number of people that would benefit, you know, from having these. But what we find, and we kind of, our software works as a, you know, like a whole school license or a whole enterprise license, for example, so that absolutely everybody can access the software. It's not singled out for, you know, just for a few people. One of my colleagues always uses the phrase "necessary for some, useful for all." So there may be learners, or there may be employees that couldn't get through their school day or their work day without having these tools to support them. But there are other people there that will find them useful as well, whether it's just for productivity reasons or, you know, temporarily as well. You might find that, you know, if a student falls and breaks their arm, for example, they wouldn't necessarily always need assistive technology, but, you know, if they can't use their writing or hand or arm, and they can't type, then they can use things like the speech to text. You know, you might find even things like I speak a couple of other languages as well, so I speak French and Spanish, and sometimes I find that if I'm reading a long document, it can be quite hard to get through. But if I switch the voice into that language and I listen to it, and I can follow along at the same time, it's reducing that cognitive load and helping me to better understand, you know, and absorb the information. So there's lots and lots of different ways that you can actually use the software, whether or not you have identified needs.
Yeah,
and there'll always be Yeah, and there's always going to be, you know, students in school or people in the workplace that struggle, that maybe mask, that silently struggle, that have never been assessed, but you know, if they were to be assessed, you know, you might discover that they can benefit from text to speech or speech to text or from a screen overlay or whatever, a mind mapping software, any kind of form of assistive technology.
And I'm intrigued within the schools or within workplaces, are there misconceptions, when you're trying to bring in technology or someone, a parent or staff member wants to bring it in? Do you face many challenges within that?
Yes, I think I think that's starting to change a little bit. I think there are a lot of fantastic people doing great things when it comes to inclusive education, and people are more aware, and it's becoming more widely known and widely accepted. But yes, there are times when it'll be, well, you'll get that attitude of, but oh, I only need it for one student, or oh, there's only two students in the whole school that need that. Or you get sometimes, surprisingly, educators who think assistive technology, is that not like cheating? Is that not giving an unfair advantage when really it's actually leveling that playing field? Some people see it as a bit of a crutch, that it's only for a small group of learners, but in reality, it really does benefit everyone. If you think of something like ramps, and curb cuts and things like that physically, they help people with prams as well as people in wheelchairs. So things like, just like tools like read and write, support a broad range of needs and learning preferences.
Brilliant, brilliant. How do you feel then with them misconceptions that schools have, let's, what schools, companies, whatever it is, that how do you think we could move forward? How could we remove that one size fits all framework where they can look at individual learners? Um, what do you think would need to happen? Or
I think a lot of it comes down to awareness
mm-hmm.
and education and knowledge. I think it's important that everybody is aware of neurodiversity and neurodivergence, and understands it, and to be aware that it's not something to fix. It's a fact, it exists, and it's, we should be accepting of it, and we should support people to, with accommodations, we should support people to overcome areas that they find challenging, and help them find, where their strengths are as well.
Yeah.
I think when people repeatedly hear, and again, thinking of my son as an example in this, when they repeatedly hear what they can't do,
Yes.
the impact that has, often unseen and over a long time, is really it's quite huge, and it's quite devastating sometimes.
It really is.
Um, and when you have like an 8-year-old boy saying, "I'm not good at anything," that's it's absolutely heartbreaking. And when you think how many people feel like that, um, you know, shifting that to go, okay, well, maybe you struggle with this, but that's okay because we can work on it, and here are some things we can do, and here are some tools that can help you with that. But don't forget about all of the fantastic things that you can do, and all of the strengths that you do have.
It's a really heartbreaking one, because I think it's 20,000 more negative criticisms a neurodivergent child faces within their childhood, which is a lot. And just when you're talking, I like reflect back to my own, and it's not even big. It's like, oh, if you just tried harder, or if and that's lack of understanding.
Yeah.
And you just feel not good enough, and you just feel like, for my own case, I remember secondary school for me was just like a whole sensory overload anyway, going in and out. And because I couldn't follow what was going on in the class, I would try. At the end of the day, I was so exhausted from the sensory overload, I wasn't able to follow the full classes. So then you kind of just give up, because it's easier to seem like you don't care than where in fact you do care, but you just don't want to be seen as stupid or not enough, or you can't do what everybody else can do. And it's a really hard and dark place to be for some children. And I think there is a huge responsibility within the education system to change that. Because you're responsible for a child's education, but you're also responsible for their mental health while they're in your care.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you find that still stays with you?
The
Or you've
the
kind of
not
found ways? Yeah.
It absolutely does creep into my life every so often, and there's no point in being dishonest and say that doesn't happen. Of course it does. And it means, what it highlights to me is that maybe I haven't been taking care of myself, or, I need to slow down, because you start to notice that you're looking for goals that are unattainable, that are probably more neurotypical. Whereas I'm starting to learn things like I might have something planned for the day. And obviously I am at an advantage of being my own boss. My husband says I have the worst boss in the world. But if my day is just not going that way, the way I've planned it, I've just got to surrender to that and show myself compassion. Now, that's
Mm.
easier sometimes than others. If I'm moving fast pace with everything, I find it hard to catch that. But in fact, you've actually caught me in one of them moments the last few days. They've been hard. They've been hard,
Mm.
and I'm not getting everything done that I'd like to get done, and I should be able to do these things. The reality is, I just can't. For
Yeah.
whatever reason, my body needs to slow down. It needs to rest. My brain just is fog. There is hormones at play there too, but I need to just allow that. And then next week or the next few days, I'll be absolutely plowing away at it all again.
Yeah.
And so yes,
Like, yeah, you need that real level of self-awareness, don't you? And I think that's why for me it's important now. Like lots of schools are starting to look at things like well-being and emotional intelligence, and I think that is so so important because I kind of come from a generation where you know emotions were seen almost like a bad thing. Like you had to suppress them. You weren't allowed to show um, that you were annoyed or angry or frustrated. You had to sit down and sit still and be quiet and be good. But now I think given students that emotional vocabulary to be able to express and understand how they feel and know that that's okay and that it'll pass and these are some things that can help is really really important.
yes, I couldn't agree more. It's something we do within our home. It's obviously two neurodivergent parents and only a toddler, but it's just naming the feeling. And
Mm,
sometimes that's easier said than done, because sometimes we don't know the feeling. Um,
yeah,
and there's something that I found can be very beneficial is, if you don't know the feeling, if you can link it to a scene of a movie, or a song where you felt that feeling before, then you can connect that, oh, okay, that feeling, what is that? Um, it helps a lot. I've
I like that. Nice visualization.
Yeah, it does help, because sometimes you're so out of it, you can't fully name that feeling, and for me, music is very powerful.
Mm.
So I know when I can relate it to music, then what is going on for me internally. Um, it was something I was going to say, but you'll know, I've lost I've lost track of what it was. I'm sure it will.
There's a nice link in that though, even things like music and arts that are
Yes,
sometimes a little bit forgotten in
yeah,
the education curriculum, or they're a little bit of a side. Oh, we've got half an hour, let's do some of this, but that can be a real fantastic outlet for any learner, but especially, for neurodivergent learners who often have this real gift and creativity that can be one of their strengths that is often not nurtured
yeah.
enough.
And like, just when you're saying that, like for me in class, I've said this before, so I won't, but I doodle, because that's how I
Yeah,
concentrate. And in school back in our time, it was seen as not paying attention. But it is about finding things that support each individual. And it does frustrate me that there's the deficit, or it's seen as less than. Whereas in fact, we can do more than a neurotypical person in a different way. So it's what we can do, they can't do, and vice versa.
Mm.
And there's a reason, I believe, but behind that wiring, um, evolutionary speaking. So I think the more people, especially who are successful, who start speaking up, it helps children nowadays advocate for themselves and feel that it's okay to be different. But I do feel within school, teachers and principals and educators really, really need a lot of training. It should happen when they're in university before they even get into the field.
Yeah, and that's the difficulty as well, that in teacher teacher training, I get there's starting to be, more talk about it, and a little bit more focus on it. But essentially, the section of training that they get in terms of inclusive education or special educational needs is very, very small. And unless you go on to specialize in that, or or go and seek out further training, and it's very, very limited exposure that a lot of teachers get. And then there's this almost expectation that any SEN learners will, oh, well, the SENCO or the head of inclusion or the inclusion team will look after them, when in actual fact, like, every teacher is responsible for that education and for inclusion. And I guess coming back to that sort of your one size, moving away from that one size fits all question, like, it really starts with listening and observing and understanding each other, understanding that students' challenges, and also understanding their strengths, and offering them the choice. Like Universal Design for Learning, UDL is a fantastic framework for inclusive education, where you're offering, you're providing multiple means for learners to engage with content. You're providing multiple means for them to show what they know and express their learning. So rather than expecting absolutely everybody to write, a 500-word essay,
Mm-hmm.
well, can they have the choice? Can they write an essay? Can they deliver a presentation? Can they record an interview? Can they design a poster? There's lots of ways that they can actually express their knowledge and their understanding without necessarily just always having to be that one same way that can be difficult for some people.
Are you finding then within the GCSEs and A levels, and you said you do the IB curriculum as well? Are you seeing that there's potentially a change for the way examinations are done, or do you think we're still living in the old?
think I think there's a lot of talk about it,
Yeah.
and there has been a lot of talk about it, and a lot of people saying for a long time that this needs to change. It's not working. I don't really see too much evidence of action being taken on actually changing that in any sort of significant way. I think we're still stuck with the old system for. I hope somebody proves me wrong and somebody comes in and completely,
Yeah.
redoes it all from the ground up in a way that offers more choice, and more, a much broader way of assessing people. But I think at the moment I don't see any real evidence of that
No, and
happening.
unfortunately, I think it's kind of a generational shift. That thankfully the world our children are grown up in isn't fully inclusive as of yet, but it's going that way, and there is a lot more education and understanding. So I guess when they get to their stage of becoming teachers or whatever that might be, they
Mm-hmm.
naturally will be more understanding and inclusive. But yeah, happening overnight, I think we've still a long, long way to go.
Yeah, I say, like, there are so many people that recognize, I think, that it's, the systems, the current education systems aren't working great. But yeah, I think it'll take a while before we see any real meaningful change in that way.
Maybe all the technology will come.
Yeah, and even things like, exams moving, like, more exams are, they were talking about moving online, and things like that as well. So
It makes such a
that
difference.
may.
Because even, when you say that, like, one of the things I struggled with in exams was the auditory, within the room. Or
Mm.
always big, big rooms, you'll hear someone sniff, shift their legs,
Yeah.
kick something, click a pen. So the distraction's just there constantly.
Mm.
So having something online would be a lot more beneficial.
Yeah, and that's something I guess like for a long time was never even considered, like those sort of sensory um, inputs and overloads and distractions and things like that. For anybody, that can be very distracting for anybody, but for someone that has those kind of sensory overloads, they can really hone in on that, person tapping their foot or clicking their pen.
Yeah. Like even I always take my noise cancelling headphones with me, and I do debate taking sunglasses also for when I'm presenting workshops, because depending on the lighting, that can be a lot for me anyway, and people blur, but the acoustics of the room distract me from
Mm.
delivering, so I take them with me and I leave it optional whether I'll put them on or not. Obviously I can still hear people, but that it takes away the rest of the noise that is distracting me. And also because I feel it's important that I start doing that, because if I don't do it, how do I expect the next generation to do it? Not advocate for myself.
Yeah.
Even I was in a cafe the other day and I really like the cafe, but the acoustics are terrible. And there's some small changes that could be made there that would actually mean I would go back to change the
Mm-hmm.
acoustics. It's not that it would be a full renovation that would be needed, but I would have never thought in my childhood to do that.
Yeah.
But even to identify that was what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I think that's where I guess that kind of everybody understanding and the education of everybody
yeah,
around the impact of things like that on neurodivergent people is really important. How many people when they are designing a space, or they're designing a cafe, or they're designing a classroom, or designing a lesson, whatever it might be, how many people think of that from the very beginning
yeah,
and plan it in? Like inclusion is it's not something that happens by accident. It has to be intentional, and trying to fix things after the fact is a lot more difficult than actually designing, with inclusion in mind in the first place.
and like I really appreciate that, because where you're designing for inclusion, for neurodivergent learners, you're actually designing for everyone. Because although I might hear, a lot more, it doesn't mean that someone else doesn't. They just don't
Yeah.
notice it. It'll still impact them at the end of the day. They'll still
Hmm.
wonder why they're maybe feeling a bit, tired or whatever that is. It might not just be as heightened as mine, um, but it still impacts them. So I think when you consider that, when you're creating anything with restaurant, cafe, schools, whatever, office spaces, when you realize, okay, well, this is actually going to benefit everybody within here, then it's a different way to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's coming back to that, necessary for some, useful for all.
Yes.
And if you make small changes and small adjustments, even things like if you're designing a worksheet or whatever it might be, if you use a dyslexia friendly font,
Yeah.
that's going to be really useful for people with dyslexia, but anyone who doesn't have dyslexia won't even notice.
Yeah.
They won't notice the subtle change in the font. They'll it's little things like that
So it's not
that
extra
I think
work
are
for
really
a
important.
teacher.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
you
Just
just
being accessible from the outset, and even simple things like fonts and color contrasts and things like that you might not necessarily think about.
that's why it's so important within training. Um, do you mind if I spin back round to your son and his diagnosis?
Hmm.
How long ago was he diagnosed?
So, well, the way things are, like we're based in Northern Ireland in the UK, and things are very, very slow moving there. So he still has a final step to be seen by a pediatrician for an official diagnosis. But everything, like all of the assessments so far, have put him very, very high on the scale for ADHD, and his teachers have also kind of flagged a few autistic tendencies with him as well. And when they explained what they seen, I said, yeah, okay, yeah, I see that. I actually originally thought that he might be dyslexic because it took him a little while to kind of, his reading and writing were pretty slow. When it came to things like phonics, he could, like, he knew the sounds and he could say the sounds, but when it came to blending them together, he struggled a little bit. So that was kind of working, because I work in EveryWay, and I was aware of dyslexia. That was a little bit of a flag, I think, initially for me. Then we did a screener, and it sort of was like, well, there are a few signs here, but it could just be that he's having a day of difficulty concentrating. So they said that they would keep an eye and repeat it, but his reading started coming on really, really well. And then it was other things that we noticed, like difficulty focusing, on finishing tasks, focusing on anything for any length of time, sitting still. He talks a lot. He calls out in class, instead of putting his hand up, it comes into his head and it comes out of his mouth. And when you started to notice that gap, I think, between his verbal ability, like I say, he's got a very, very rich vocabulary, very articulate little boy, but that wasn't coming across in his written work.
Yeah.
So we sort of I spoke to the teacher and I spoke to the Senko at school, and we started talking about ADHD, and then went through the very long process, and the very long waiting list for that. Unless you can go and get a private assessment, you're talking probably anywhere from 18 months to 3 years plus, depending on if it's ADHD or if it's autism. I think has a kind of minimum 4-year wait for full diagnosis. So I think for me, that's why it is important to not just accommodate students that have an official diagnosis. I think we should be identifying the needs and teaching to the need, and having tools available, having assistive technology available. You mentioned head cancelling earphones there. That is something that I actually got for my son this year, just to try it, just to see if that actually made a difference, because he talked about, when he was trying to do something, like there was no way you could have, if he was doing his homework, there was no way the TV could be on, like in another room in the background, because he was hearing that. If there was something sitting on the table beside him, he was fidgeting with that. So we kind of had to make a very clear workspace. I tried these headphones, and I couldn't actually believe the difference in his, like, he sat down and he just got on with his homework, and he did it in a third of the time than it normally takes him. And talking about self-advocacy, he actually said to me, "Can I take these to school tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, okay, we'll put them in your school bag and we'll speak to your teacher. And obviously, if your teacher's talking, you'll not be able to wear headphones. But maybe if you have to do some independent work, maybe she might let you wear them." And she did. And she even commented the difference that one simple thing made to him. And I think he's at an age where, and all the kids just accept now that sometimes Ricky wears his headphones when they're working in class, and that's okay. But it will probably come to a point where he will be too self-conscious for that, because it makes him stand out and it makes him look different.
Well, there is actually, I don't have them yet, I will get them, but they're buds you can put in. So
Yeah.
that. So it means you can hear, but it cancels out a lot of the noise in the background. So it's something you could pop in. I know if he's short hair, it's not like me, I could pull it down and cover.
Yeah. He did actually ask recently if he could get.
You can, and when you say fidgeting, like always, I have something. Like I'm sitting here talking to help me concentrate, and that's what I need. And I don't know if you've got one yet, but weighted lap pad.
I was actually I've kind of been looking into weighted blankets, and you can get weighted toys and things now. So it's something definitely need to look at, because he, again, when it comes to sensory things, that when he gives you a hug, he properly squeezes, so he needs that kind of that deep pressure.
Yes.
So I
Same.
think something like a weighted blanket will help. In school, he sits on what they call like one of those little wobble cushions,
Yeah.
and that's so you're kind of balancing on it constantly, so that helps him with that as well. They've introduced things like sensory circuits in the morning that a few kids go out and they kind of do some
Right.
sensory circuits. So it means when they go into the class, they're actually ready to sit down and start learning.
That's incredible. And just when you're talking about the weighted, because I have a weighted shoulder pad as well and a weighted blanket, but when I start to notice myself maybe becoming a little bit dysregulated, the weighted blanket for me is incredible. And it's something I've actually just noticed about myself recently is I don't realize I'm full till long after. The interception of my body isn't
Mm.
there yet. I love a full feeling, but it's a delayed reaction. So I love that pressure. I love pressure. So
Yeah.
the heaviness on my stomach sometimes is where I find soothing. Um, so to prevent me overeating and forget, what I do is I put a weighted blanket on me or a weighted pad to give me that sensation, because I'm obviously craving it externally. So I know food's going to give me that feeling, but now I
Mm.
have an external source that will help me.
Yeah. It's even like things like that. Obviously, like weighted lap pads or blankets or whatever it might be, those are not necessarily technology, but they're assistive tools. They're
Yeah,
tools that can help and support, and those are things that I think I keep kind of coming back to. Everybody needs to know and understand these things.
yeah,
I think if I hadn't worked where I work and if I didn't have that understanding of dyslexia and ADHD and neurodiversity in general and how that can kind of present, I think for a long time I kind of noticed like Ricky was very high energy and um, very boisterous and very, very talkative and very hard to kind of move from one thing to the other and never quite finished doing that and he was off doing something else. And I think a lot of people, like when I spoke to friends about it, they're like, "Oh, he's just a little boy. He's just a typical boy. That's just that's just what they're like." And I have an older daughter who's very academic and kind of comparing his development to hers as well. And people would just be like, "Oh, but girls are faster. They learn to read faster." And there was that kind of dismissal of it, and I just kept thinking, "No, that's not it." There's definitely something there, but I think if I didn't have that background knowledge, I could have easily been like, oh, okay, well that's just
yeah.
that's just how boys are,
I
you know?
yeah, and I do feel that there is some gut instinct as well, though. As a
Hmm.
mother, that generally, if I speak to mothers, they kind of just, even if they don't have that much knowledge, but a little bit, I feel like they already know.
Yeah.
The diagnosis isn't always as much a surprise it might be for the fathers, and that's not to take away. It's just whatever that intuition is, we just tend to know.
Hmm. And I've done a lot of like educating myself, a lot of
Yeah,
watching webinars and reading up on things and what helps. And I've gone in to speak to the teachers and listen to what they're observing, what's working in school, and I tell them what's working at home. So having that sort of that open dialogue and that collaboration, you don't always get that. I know from speaking to the teachers that some parents are over demanding, and kind of not respecting their time, as teachers, and that they have a whole class and,
yeah,
and, and other people, and they kind of just are very demanding. And then you get the other spectrum where they just don't want to recognize that, like that their child might need a little extra support in some areas as well.
yeah, and that's hard when you face that,
Mm,
parent, I imagine, because we want to protect our child, and you want the education that they're in to support them, and you also don't want to have to move a child from the school, the friends they're in order to support that. So
yeah.
it's very sad, and how to make a decision around that, I imagine, is usually pretty challenging when
Mm.
we face that issue. How do you feel your son knowing what he knows now, and how do you think that's impacted him and his self-esteem?
I've been very open with him, in talking about ADHD. I've showed him, like age appropriate videos to help him understand, um, I thought that was important because I did start to notice that his self-esteem was being impacted. He was saying things like he was comparing himself to other people. He was saying, "I'm not good at this and I'm no good at that," and it was starting to impact. Oh, I don't like school. Um, and when you hear like, some of the conversations that he would have with me, and he's a very he's quite an emotionally intelligent little boy. He's very deep feeling, and listening to how him expressing how things made him feel, it was it was difficult. And I didn't want him, struggling with that and feeling bad all the time and feeling like he couldn't do this or feeling like he was less than. So we started to focus on, okay, well, right, maybe you struggle with that, but you're really good at this. And we started looking at his strengths and talking about those more and building him up that way and saying it's okay that you can't do that, or it's okay that you find that difficult, or that you struggle with this. Let's see how we can make that better. Let's see how we can support you there. But don't forget that you're really good at this. And, and he would compare himself to his sister, who, like I said, was very academic and, oh, well, she's smarter than me and she's faster than me and she can do this. And I would say, well, okay, but you're better at this than she is. So just help with him to realize that everybody's different and that's okay.
And he'll be better at her at some things, better than
Yeah.
some things too. And it's just realizing that, what your natural ability is, where you were supposed to navigate in life. And it's not all about academics.
Yeah.
Um,
And sharing stories with him as well about, famous people and successful people and, business owners and who have ADHD or dyslexia or autism or whatever it might be, like sharing those examples and just having that awareness that, okay, this is not something bad, and this is not something that needs to be fixed. It just is. And everybody's different, and that's great. In fact, I think it's fantastic. The world would be a very, very boring place if we all did things the same way and thought things the same way. And I think it's there is diversity for a reason.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And I hope he does learn that. And it sounds like school is supportive.
Yeah, it's. I think as well as he's in primary school, so it's some teachers as he's moved up through the school, some teachers have been better than others. Some have been fantastic. Some have not been maybe quite as understanding, but I think it's again those that have experience and have a better more experience, more understanding, more training versus those who maybe don't quite know how to handle children that don't fit into that, sit down and listen and sit still and be quiet. It's difficult, and that's why it's so important for people to understand that and to try and have that awareness of small adjustments that they can make. We the school have put like a personal learning plan in place with them and focusing on like a few little things, a few little things at a time and small adjustments to help him to learn and to help him to do things differently as well.
Does he help co-create the plan?
He doesn't actually. I was consulted on it, but I think that's a really important point. I think, yeah,
it's their journey. I find schools do that a lot. I actually remember helping a family, and they brought me into a school meeting, and they had said, well, what do you think will help her? And I said, well, have you asked her? And nobody can know that person better than themselves. We can perceive, but I do find it's always beneficial when a child is part of the IEP process. And it also
I would do that. I guess I do that at home. Okay, well, what would make that better, or what do you think would help here? But yeah, that's a really good point actually, and I think something that definitely should happen more is having that student voice, that student input into it as well.
And what what do you feel, for the future? How are your feelings for the future as he grows up in the world and goes into the workplace?
Um, yeah, I do worry. Even like things like this morning, it took him a full 10 minutes to put his shoes on, and they weren't even like tie laces. They were Velcro shoes, But so part of me thinks, okay, how's he if I'm not there, kind of telling him and instructing him or supporting him, how's he ever gonna get himself off to university or get himself be on time for a job and do what he's supposed to do. So it's just there's has to be a lot of work I think go into the background to get the supports in place that he needs, and maybe he might need an app with reminders. And at the minute we have a little whiteboard where we kind of write out, do this, then this, then this, to stop me from having to stand there and kind of shout out. But I think, like you say, involving him in his journey, letting him understand, helping him realize the importance of developing his executive functioning and things like that is key. But I see more and more, I think, just in terms of inclusive education and inclusive workplaces, there's more and more happening in a really good way in that. There are so many more people talking about it. There are so many advocates out there. There are people doing fantastic work and raising awareness. There are companies out there who are fully inclusive, who have inclusive hiring practices. They have assistive technology and tools available for everybody. They provide accommodations. They're very understanding and even actively recruiting um, neurodivergent people to bring those kind of creative abilities in and the different thought processes and the working really well, like the people element. So I think there's a lot happening, and I hope to see that continue. Even looking in places like the UAE is a fantastic example of from a government, Ministry of Education level, that knowledge and awareness of inclusive education and pushing it into policies and things like that is fantastic to see.
Yeah, I think it's very important within policies, and as you said, within the recruitment process. When you see that, as a neurodivergent individual what you're getting yourself into. If
Mm.
they're supporting you from the interview process, you can be guaranteed, well, you can have a high probability that there will be that support
Yeah.
throughout. Um,
And I think it makes you, even seeing something like that, if you're applying for a job and you see that there are support and accommodations available, it's going to make you feel more inclined or more comfortable to disclose, because a lot of people in the workplace don't disclose
no,
any form of neurodiversity because they think it's going to impact their career and their development.
and unfortunately, that is the case in some
Mm.
instances. I have met many people where they've been in very high positions, and a lot of the work was taken off them. They were seen as not capable anymore.
Yeah.
And I find when I'm talking to people, instead of, if you don't feel comfortable disclosing your diagnosis, saying things like, I work better when. So let's
Hmm.
say, I work better when you send me detailed instructions by email, because I may be distracted if you verbally tell me that. So it's learning about yourself and then being able to
Yeah.
advocate in a safe way. I think really helps people, because sometimes for individuals it's also around acceptance of themselves before they can do that within the workplace. And we grew up in a generation where it was seen as less than. Um, so it would be amazing if there was a lot of psychological safety, that people felt a lot
Yeah,
more comfortable.
absolutely. And then the reduction then in, people that are having to mask continually every day and struggling, and the mental health impact and things that can have, can then have an unseen impact when it comes to work. So just having that psychological safety, like you say, can have a real ripple effect elsewhere.
Yeah, and for the likes of your son, he has that. He's that chance now to be his authentic self, not what
Mm.
the world wanted him or needed him to be, there is no point in lying and say that there aren't times where I don't still mask. I don't realize it till after, but I guess she's part of me now, not in a bipolar way.
Mm.
It's 37 years of my life that I had to act a way that wasn't authentic to me, that sometimes that will come out. But that's also, that's just part of who I am now. And that's everyone's journey for what they go through. But I think it's wonderful that your son has the support of your family there, and that understanding and knowledge to grow up like as the person he was supposed to be.
Yeah. And I think I've had to do a lot of educating of, of my partner, his dad, of my parents, who would have been quite dismissive of, again, of that generation of, or do these things exist? Are they real? They would have had the, like for a long time, someone with dyslexia might have been seen as lazy. Someone with ADHD might have been seen as naughty. So it's kind of peeling back and removing all those really, really harmful labels, and just identifying, okay, this is someone that has challenges with this. This is how we can support those challenges. But while they have those challenges, they have these amazing strengths as well, and we need to focus and nurture those too.
Yeah. I think it's so important. And like I always find with people, if you give them an example of something that they just can't do, maybe they haven't trained to do it, or sometimes it's an animal, to climb a tree, they start to understand that it's just okay, right? Okay, so like physically, that is a big struggle. So sometimes it's just.
And I still have that sometimes, like if we're out for dinner and my son, he struggles to kind of still at the dinner table, and having his dad not say to him, not tell him off or think that he's being naughty. He can't do it. So now I try and always have like fidgets or something there that he can kind of use to distract, so he's not banging the fork off the table and things like that. So just to go, look, he's not doing it on badness. He's not doing it on purpose. He's struggling right now, and he needs an outlet. So
if he just needs to get up and move, then like we sitting around a dinner table, I think is a societal thing that we all try to do. Some of us struggle sit for that long period of time. So if you just need to get up and move a little bit, that's okay. I mean, I know I can I like to sit after and chat for ages, but my husband really struggles. It's like, okay, we're going now. And he's ADHD, so he likes to move a lot. Has, I mean, an incredible amount of energy. It's to watch him sometimes. I'm like, how are you still going?
And that, and that's going to come in really handy sometimes. That's going to be a huge strength in some areas.
Exactly. And I do, like within him, I do see his strengths so much. I think the only downfall for both of us that we would have had is that not understanding why we were the way we were or are. And now that we understand it really frees us. As I said, there are still bad days. I'm not going to lie to anyone and say, you've been in that world for so long, and when you are that bit more vulnerable for whatever reason within a day, you can feel not enough. But it's just trying to get back to that place of enough. But I don't like to use superpowers, but there's definitely reasons. Well, I believe, historically speaking, that our minds are wired the way they are wired.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a couple of the words that you said there really kind of summarize everything when it comes to inclusion. It's that awareness and understanding and acceptance as well.
Yes.
I think that's really key for the person themselves, for their family around them, for their teachers, their colleagues, their employers. I think everybody needs to have that awareness and understanding and acceptance.
Yeah. And I think that the judgment, it's letting go of that judgment of because someone's different, that they don't fit in. I guess as a mother and with your career, how have how has the now almost diagnosis, how has that changed you within your career and as a parent?
Um, I think, I mean, since I've been working in this sector, I have absolutely loved it. Like I said in the beginning, it just it's it brings like real meaning to your work. But I think since this journey with my son, it has bringing a new level or a new depth. I think to my understanding of it and to my passion for it and my drive for it. The more schools that we can reach with our software, the more students that we can help to realize that they are not broken and they don't need to be fixed, that they just need a little bit of help in some areas. And there are tools out there that can help with that. And give them the support, give them the confidence and the independence and the self belief to go on and fulfill their potential. That's just given me an extra drive forward, and I can then bring like insights into things that I have seen with my son. I can bring those insights into work as well. And I did a webinar last year, and it was around ADHD and how technology can support ADHD. When we had been previously very quite focused on dyslexia as sort of a main support area, but it's bringing in that we don't just support dyslexia. We can support these different traits and different areas of challenge as well.
And while technology absolutely is it's just been so impactful for the neurodivergent community, particularly within schools, what do you think we need to keep a watch out for? How, protecting our children?
Well, I think there's a lot. Obviously, AI is kind of everywhere at the moment. So it's just, again, that AI is another area that can really help when it comes to inclusive education. Um, but at the same time, we need to be very careful sometimes with technology. We need to educate students how to use things in the right way, when to use them, when's an appropriate use and when is not an appropriate use. Like, you can use AI to help you formulate and brainstorm and chat through ideas, but it's not okay to use it to completely write an assignment, for example. So there's educating students around correct and responsible and safe use of technology, and retaining that human element as well. But I think just technology in general, like they have to be given the opportunity to try things and figure out what works for them and what doesn't. So they need the choice and the opportunity to try tools, because some students will find speech to text, it absolutely changes their life. As I've been told by some people before, and some people, it just won't be for them. So I think just exposing students and allowing them to experiment, and that comes down to us, whether that be in schools or in workplaces, having the knowledge of the tools that are available and allowing people to try them out as well is really important.
That's really good. Really good that they have that option to be able to explore. Is there anything that we didn't talk about today that you feel would be important for our audience to listen to?
No, I think for me, like one of my passions is really around trying to move away from that deficit model. It's still so prevalent, because it's so embedded in systems. And when we talk about neurodivergence, it's always focusing on the deficits and on the can'ts. And I think we need to flip that and focus more. Okay, there are deficits here, maybe in certain ways. There are things that people struggle with, but there are ways we can support that.
Yes.
And so let's do that, and at the same time, then let's focus on all the great things and all the strengths that they have, and really, really nurture those, because that is going to build up the self-esteem and the self-confidence and the self-belief.
I definitely think deficit needs to be removed.
Yeah.
It's focused in a lot of areas. not maybe the area that you want someone to focus in, but areas that its brain feels needs focus.
So moving away from, oh, someone has dyslexia, that means they can't do X, Y, or Z, to, oh, someone has dyslexia, oh, wow. So, how does that manifest in you? Are you a creative thinker? Do you think outside of the box? Are you a real people person? Where is the strength in it? Where do your strengths lie, rather than going straight to the, oh, well, you can't do X, Y, and Z?
Which is really all of us in any walk of life. We all have strengths, we all have weaknesses, and it's better to just look at it that way. There is no person who has it all together. And I think as neurodivergent individuals, we try to be brilliant neurotypical people and neurodivergent people at the same time. Whereas if we just work on being us, then it would be it would be amazing.
Absolutely.
I forget. Is there any advice? I had a question in my head and it had gone out. Have you any advice for parents out there?
I think just knowing that the journey that you're on it's not going to be easy. It's not easy, and that's largely to do with misconceptions and archaic systems that are not fit for purpose, biases of other people. But just keep going, stay positive, look for the positives, and seek support. There is a lot of support out there. I don't think anyone is built to go on this journey alone, and to go through life alone. I think we all need support, and we all need to just find that. There are groups out there. There are lots of things you can do, and I think just be very open and honest with your child as well, and talk to them. Find out how they experience things, and that might give you some little insights into ways to make the journey easier for them as well.
Incredible. Thank you so much. Could I ask that you share the link of Adam's story, that we could maybe put it on the text below?
Yeah, the little case study with.
Yeah. Is that possible?
Yeah, of course.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much for your time today.
No, you're more than welcome.